Margaret. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Like you said, my name is Maestes. I'm the state representative for this area. My area represents this part of the west side, but I also represent a big part of the valley, as well as the Northeast Heights. But I have spent quite a bit of time here in the neighborhood, and I am familiar with a lot of the problems that you all have experienced entering and exiting the subdivision. Actually, that's part of the reason I'm a few minutes late, because it took me a really long time to get across, and so I certainly understand the safety hazards and the concerns that many of you have. I understand that it was represented at some time that there was to be a light installed. I understand that that's no longer an option, and so what we're here to do tonight is to have a discussion. We've invited members of the New Mexico Department of Transportation to sit here and provide answers to some of the questions that many of you have. It's also my understanding that you all had a similar meeting back in 2004. So it is really disappointing to hear that nothing has been done over the last 2 years. My apologies, because this is really the first time I've become aware of it. Barbara emailed me about a month ago. We were in the middle of the legislative session and told me about the problem. I didn't know that it was as big of a problem as it was until I had that conversation with her. And what I told her is that if it's a priority for you all, it's a priority for me. So I really want to see this through for you. Hopefully the Department of Transportation will be able to answer some of those questions and give us some feedback regarding the alternatives that many have proposed, one of which is being the acceleration lane. With us today, we have from the New Mexico Department of Transportation the traffic engineer Nancy Perea, Margaret Hayes, Gilbert Sanchez, and Jill Moser. And I believe we also have a representative from the Albuquerque Police Department Northwest Command. And I'm assuming you're the representative?
I guess so. I guess I'm on that board.
Sorry, I'm not have the privilege of meeting you. If you wouldn't mind sharing your name?
Sure, I'm Jody Camacho. I'm the commander.
Okay, nice to meet you. And finally, I believe we also invited someone from Councilor Ken Sanchez's office.
Elaine Romero. And also from our office is Tom Cucci. He's one of our senior policy analysts, and we were here for the last meeting we had of this. Also joining us, unfortunately, we were all running a little late because the meetings at City Hall will be someone from our Department of Municipal Development.
Well, thank you for being here as well. And before we get started, does anyone have any questions of me before I start reading the discussion? No? Okay, so I guess what I'd like to do is hear from the department about some of the possibilities that we as a community might have for addressing some of these concerns. It's a severe safety issue for many of us. Obviously getting in and out is a problem, especially on weekends. It's my understanding things get really bad when we have people coming in and out of Sagebrush. Also on the weekends we have potentially up to 1,000 visitors coming to this very site, which is really problematic. And so if you could answer, provide us with some details in terms of potential options.
And Nancy prepared a PowerPoint, so we'll let her go through that. Just to catch up those who haven't been at the previous meetings and just kind of what we're talking about. So the background on this is, like I mentioned earlier, we had a meeting in 2014. The issue was brought to our attention about the difficulty entering and exiting this intersection of Coors and Bosque Meadows, and so the state did do a analysis to address the inquiry about getting a traffic signal at this intersection. The analysis was completed in 2014, and it did identify that a signal warrant was not warranted. By warranting, it means the state follows a federal guideline. It's called the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. There are 9 warrants on that need to be met, or at least a portion of them, to identify that this is the appropriate location for a signal. This particular intersection did not meet it, mostly the reason being the volume of traffic coming from the minor, which in this case is Bosque Meadows. In addition to that, the state did a gap study also done in 2014. We had several people observed the weekend traffic and the weekday traffic, and I think we had, Gilbert, you can help me if I get any of this wrong. I know you were one of them who had been part of the observations. We had a morning, midday, and evening gap analysis, and to identify if there were appropriate gaps in the traffic along Coors, exiting and entering Bosque Meadows. And then I just wanted to bring to the attention that kind of the average weekday traffic that currently travels on Coors from 2010 to 2014. It seemed like it was larger. It had a higher volume in 2010 and has decreased slightly into 2014. That's the number. So the studies, like I said, we do have the analysis. We can provide that in full to the neighbor association if needed. But there were, between the years of 2009 and 2011, because when this was completed in 2014, those were the only crash data that we had. They identified 5 crashes. There was a speed study done on Coors, and what that requires is we identify vehicles at what pace, at what speed that they're traveling. Is there not when they're in a platoon, not when they're as a group, but individual vehicles. So we'll sit out and observe the traffic as they're coming through. What we did identify is, as you know, Coors is posted at 45. What we found was the 85th percentile, which is the 85% of the people are traveling at that speed, was between 51 and 52 miles per hour. So I'm sure you guys can agree to that, or you probably even anticipate that it was higher than that. So that is what we found on that day when we did the study. And then, of course, it was brought to our attention about the weekend traffic impacts, and we did have several individuals from our office observe that over the weekend to see some of the issues that were coming. I'd like to keep this as informal as possible. I don't want it to be just us giving information out. Please speak up, bring up. Yes.
So I'm curious, and I understand this is going to be outside the scope of this project, but I was very surprised to see the Sevilla, I think I'm saying the street light correct, go up when they've got an underdeveloped subdivision. And so that's just down the street on Coors.
Okay.
And we have, with Sagebrush, we've got so much traffic that really prevents us from getting out of our subdivision. And so I would be curious to see if there has, what were, this 9-point study that you referenced, what came out of that for warranting Sevilla to get this stoplight, because very similar dynamics in regards to Bosque Meadows versus that area. And how did they get a stoplight versus us?
Okay. Anytime any request comes for a signal, everybody goes through the same criteria. It doesn't do us any good to not be consistent.
Sure.
So
Sure.
When that analysis was done, can you help me? Can you bring up Google Earth and let's show that intersection? From what I'm remembering, I thought Sevilla had cross street. It has 4 legs versus the 2, and it connects to other collector routes.
With the development of the subdivision, they created an entryway.
Okay.
Yes, going east, yes. But I think the thing that was relatively surprising with the establishment of that stoplight is that subdivision is not yet completed.
Okay.
And they really have not, only within about the last 6 months or so have they really started more construction in that area.
Okay. For clarity, whenever we require, before a signal gets studied, we do what's called a traffic impact analysis. And what we do is we have the developer identify what the full build is going to be for that development. Because we want to be proactive and not reactive, knowing that development, sometimes that development is a build out year of 5 years, sometimes it's a build out year of more. So what we do is, it's more difficult for the state to get those improvements on the back end. So what our mode of operation at this point is, if it's identified in the traffic impact analysis, those improvements are being made off-site, are needed off-site due to that development, we have those improvements built, with the understanding the traffic will come based on the land use they've identified to us. I mean, and that's all, it's the best attempt that we have with the information that we have at the time to make the right improvements on the off. Yes?
So, I guess my question is there exemptions that can take place in situations like what we have now? And what light anyway, my understanding from being in all this is that at one time there was a light plant in there, and in fact there was money even put into it so that there would be a light in there. What justified them not to put a light anymore, as they had proposed before, and is there any exceptions today? Because you say it's not warranted, we say it's warranted because one of the days somebody is going to get killed in there by the way the things are going. People are driving to the median to try to get out, even trash truck or buses to trying to make it to the other side. And one of the days you guys are going to have a tremendous vehicle accident there. And that's why we are concerned that there's a solution to this. I don't see, again, my question is there exemptions that can be done?
The state, okay, me being at the state was not, we've heard of this background, but I am not aware of any agreement that was put in place that identified money was set aside for this signal. This has been brought up before. We've asked on our end, those who have been with the district longer, trying to figure out if that was the case or not, and was there something written down. We'll work with our city counterpart to see if they have anything in their records, but that's all that we can do at this point. But the only thing, and this is just me looking at the issue now and hearing some of this background, is what it was identified as when Bosque Meadows first came on board, there were actually two parts in totality. It was the residential part south of Bosque Meadows intersection, and then there was a commercial identified, a commercial area north of Bosque Farms, all on the east side of Coors.
One last comment, as far as the traffic, amount of traffic, I think they're way off with those figures.
Yeah, that's really
It's hard to believe
those numbers.
The volume of traffic is over 70.
Yeah, I've lived here for 15 years, so those numbers.
It's increased,
Yeah.
it's definitely increased.
The Mid-Region Council of Governments, just so you know where we get our figures from, the Mid-Region Council of Governments puts 2 counters out, they have other ways of counting, and that's just the data we've been able to get from them.
But are you saying the data you gave us was from 2014, the same data we had before, or have you done a count of anything since?
It takes the Mid-Region Council of Governments a time frame to obtain new volume data. The information that I had, I think was 2014. 2014 was the latest information that we could have available to us.
That's why we proposed meeting again, because things have been increasing.
Okay. And keep in mind, they don't take into account the big projects such as Paseo and I-25. That is not as a note, as a little footnote saying, traffic prior diverted is doing different things on the day that was counted. So there are construction projects and other impacts that may have affected the traffic during that time. So that's why I wanted to put several years so you can kind of see. I mean, if we see a change of 10,000 vehicles, then something went wrong. But I just wanted you to kind of see that it seems to be in that growth pattern, or that.
Seems like since they put the new Paseo thing out there,
Yes.
they discovered Coors. Now they're not using that and using this, because that's really that speeding is a problem here. I mean, that's all it's allowed for, is for the kids to have a wonderful time speeding. And then
We have drag racing at 2 o'clock in the morning, of course, regularly.
That's one thing we can't control is driver behavior. One day maybe. Yes. Oh, I was going to say, it's not a very long presentation. If I can go through it, and then we can continue the conversation if you want.
Sure.
I think that would be great. I love this dialogue. Okay, we did with that. And then we talked about that we are aware of and we observe the traffic impacts. So some of the challenges are, because Coors, which is New Mexico 45, is that multi-lane corridor, it is 3 lanes in northbound, 3 lanes southbound. We're talking a 6-lane facility with raised median, left turn lanes, and it does have that high volume that I identified. The human factor, never an easy one for us to address, always a different moving target, dynamic, and we try, but we have so many different levels of ability, of aggressive driver, of young driver to older drivers. I mean, the gamut is huge, and so we do what we can to address it best. Speed enforcement, this has been brought up to us before. It happens on most of the corridors. As soon as they're widened and it looks very clear, the speeds increase. It's a tough one. It just comes with the territory of these corridors. Access management. The state is always trying to establish some type of access management on different corridors. As you can see, and you'll drive on Coors, pretty much every signalized intersection is spaced a certain distance apart. They're half-mile spacing is what they are on Coors. And that's for a reason. This is all an attempt to create the opportunity for traffic to flow on Coors, to create gaps for the side streets. So all of that is taken into account whenever we do access management. And most of Coors is pretty much access managed by raised median, controlling any left outs. Other than Bosque Meadows, pretty much all the other minors or subdivisions or minor roadways that are entering Coors are a right only. So this is one of the few locations that still has it. Now, does that say that it's always going to be that way? It doesn't. The state is working on other corridors currently that is restricting that left out. It is a very, very difficult movement when there's high volume, high speed. It's hard to address how quickly these people are moving. You know, we can design it. It's posted 45, we can design it for 45, but if they're driving 60, that sight distance from the person exiting Bosque Meadows to that vehicle becomes more and more difficult. And so that is why we're moving away from that direction in the areas of the multi-lane. And then the weekend traffic that was brought up. And I do want to, I want to make sure that we come back to that, so for clarity, we're trying to get a very good understanding of what the high issue is, what the you know, is it a couple hours in one day? Is it several times all? And I'm sure you guys have the comments on that. So those are the things, if you can think about and provide it to us, because that'll help us understand the issue better. So some of the solutions, really quickly, that we came up with, based on conversations that I had with Barbara and others within the state, was the southbound acceleration lane, a super street concept, and I'll explain these more here in a moment. A secondary access to the north and or to the south, the realignment of the cross street, and then any other ideas we want to bring to the table. All right, so very quickly, southbound Coors acceleration lane, I think it's close enough. I'm sure you guys, the idea being that it would be captured in this little refuge area in the median, to be able to make that left turn. So you'd be coming out and you go south on Coors. The concerns that the state has with this are listed, but I know it makes sense initially to see that you have a place to store while you're waiting for that opportunity to merge with the southbound traffic. It does create the need for a two-phase left turn, which means you have to cross the 3 lanes northbound, then you have to merge with the southbound lanes. And it does provide that acceleration lane. Some of the cons that the state sees, it is very difficult to look. It's about 180, maybe 160 degree turn. If you are facing in the direction of the southbound lanes and you need to merge over, you're now looking almost behind you to see if there's a gap. That creates a very difficult way to make a decision. It affects the speed, judging the speed of those vehicles traveling southbound. And it does increase that blind spot, and it narrows that cone of vision. I mean, these are our concerns that we don't want to jump to a recommendation because on the outset it seems like a good idea when we want everyone to understand that it comes with its own issues. Option 2 was the super street. So this is a concept that is taking the nation. Is coming out more so in areas where there's this high volume. It's very difficult for vehicles when there's multiple lanes to exit and cross all those lanes, making sure it's clear in both directions. So the concept is that people would exit, go right, go north into this left turn pocket and make a U-turn and then continue south on Coors. They're having problems. We'll get back to that. So that's another option. Mostly because it's taking away, what the pros on that is that it makes the U-turn occur at La Ramba Street, so that you're actually facing the southbound lanes before you make a U-turn. And then you're given a good visual of what's coming, and you can comfortably sit in the median waiting for your gap. And then it doesn't really
comfortably.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
In the left turn lane though.
It is so dangerous in that middle area with cars going by 60 miles an
Well,
hour.
in this area though, you would actually be in a left turn pocket.
Right.
So
You're
you're
already over.
completely out of the northbound through lanes, correct. So that's why this one is kind of the same concept of what you're doing. You're trying to do at Bosque Meadows, but it's putting you in a safer area. It's like a median refuge while you're waiting for your gap. And then you don't have to worry about both directions of traffic. And then the cons are, it does increase the length. We understand that. I think we identified it about 1/3 of a mile, and that's a total trip. So if you left Bosque Meadows, went north, made the U-turn and came back, it added about 1/3 of a mile. And it added 1 to 3 minutes is what we identified in the multiple observations that we made. It sounds like if that's well, let's all right, option 3. This starts to get a little tricky. This is the one that possibly uses the adjacent property to the south.
Guys, I need to hear her. If you want it to be on the camera for the other neighbors, we'll check on that.
So the idea with this one would be to work with the adjacent property owner to the south and work with the open space to see if there's an opportunity to gain access through the open space area, and possibly working with the adjacent neighbor through their parking area to get to the signal at La Oria.
The lane is called Roberson Lane.
Robertson, yes, this one here is Roberson Lane. But that does only allow a right out. So if you're trying to make a left, and, okay, so because we'll have to identify what time of day these issues are coming up. So that's just, we just threw it all out there. We're not recommending, we're not suggesting, we're just trying to think through, and that's what we're hoping you guys will provide with us too. Option 3B is joint use of the adjacent property to the north. What we are finding out is, so here's Bosque Meadows here, here's this intersection, and this space here. We've been told that this is identified as open space. Okay, and so that would be, there's the signal at Eagle Ranch. So if there's an opportunity somehow to provide an access or a roadway that would run along the ditch or however it was, and then provide access to Eagle Ranch, that gains access to a signal. Again, this is the area that I was told that this was all part of the original Bosque Meadows development. They had residential and then they had commercial, which is probably why this warranted a signal, which is probably why they placed the intersection where they placed it.
That's correct. There was commercial on that corner, and there was going to be a filling station or something.
Okay.
And when Open Space purchased the property for the public art, then that obviously went away.
Okay. And I don't know how that process can revert back, or if that's an option at this point. These are all, we're putting ideas out there. I think the final one is the realignment of the property, the road, the cross street to the west. The idea being that the signal doesn't warrant because the volumes aren't there. There's not enough vehicles exiting Bosque Meadows to warrant the signal at Coors. But if an alignment was observed, or if more traffic was brought to that intersection, that would be one of the triggers that possibly could lead to the need for a signal. But I'm not guaranteeing it. I'm just saying that would be an analysis would have to be done at that point to identify if that additional volume is enough to bring that signal to that intersection. Something completely out of our control, we understand that, but those are just some of the items that we have put out. Yes?
Could I just add that you mentioned Sevilla earlier. Bosque Meadows is basically landlocked. You're landlocked by property to the north, back here is open space, and then you've got private ownership, and then the church, of course, abuts your property. So there's no outlet except that one. Right now.
I guess I don't understand why you say we're landlocked when we have that property now that's city owned. So if the city sees a need actually to construct a frontage road, right, then why can't we do that?
That's on the city.
That would be discussions. We will work with our city counterparts. That's why we're here.
So
Let's
I guess
put
what
as
I'm
many issues.
thinking right now is
Yeah.
that truly we're not landlocked, they're not private owned properties. The city does have a parcel that we can tap into if need be.
In essence, they're the owner of the property, but we have no control over the city.
Right. I don't know what that process
And
is.
in talking about Sevilla, I think what happens is it's like what that instance Nancy was just speaking about is there is a higher density to the west, and so probably with the density of people exiting at Sevilla on the west side, and then the development on the east side coming in, those volumes combined would warrant the signal.
Yeah, but Sevilla has an way out north of them. They have a light there to go to.
Right. And
And
that's
so,
usually the concept.
When I saw the light go up there, I thought, well, they've already got an exit with the light. Why would they put another light?
Not the light at, you're not talking the signal here, you're saying there's a,
To the north, to the south of them, they have a light. And I went through that neighborhood, and you can get out at that Maestes.
Oh, okay. Oh, I
You
see.
can get out there.
Yes. So you're saying, and then they have this new development that connects to that.
Right.
Okay. Well, this fits within the half-mile spacing that the state allows, and the land use that they identified for this development showed the volume of traffic that is anticipated at that intersection. I mean, I'll put it out there that the location of Bosque Meadows is at that half mile from Lotteria and Freedom Ranch, so it's in a good location as soon as it warrants. But we don't want to introduce something that doesn't meet the criteria that has been established.
So at what point does it meet that criteria? What amount of traffic? Because you had indicated that there have been some studies that have taken place. Obviously, 2 years ago, they still had the same problem with the traffic, especially on the weekends from Sagebrush, as well as the issue here with the open space. What type of numbers are we looking for to warrant potential limitation of the traffic?
Okay, I understand.
What are all the criteria points, not just the
You guys are asking the
volume?
hard questions now, my goodness. Okay, so let's see. Margaret, do you see the one that shows the spreadsheet?
I don't have one.
Oh, we didn't, that one from the, okay. So, okay, off the top of my head, you could imagine, ones that aren't applicable for here. There's a railroad warrant, there is a pedestrian warrant, there's a school warrant, there is a peak hour warrant, say, a manufacturing company releases all their 1,000 employees at one time.
So when Intel opened in '83, we had our hours 9 in the morning to 9 at night, 9 at night to 9 in the morning, just because of that, because we anticipated traffic, right, and heavy volumes of traffic. Hours have now changed though, and so now General Mills, so there's a lot of commute.
You said it warranted in 1994?
In '83.
The 83
In
warranted?
'83 when we opened it up. Sure.
Was there ever did y'all ever have an engineer sign that warrant?
That I don't know.
Wait a minute, you're talking Intel though?
Yes.
Yes, he's talking on
Oh,
Intel.
Intel.
Yeah,
Oh,
he's
sorry.
talking about the Intel. So there is an 8-hour warrant and a 4-hour warrant. Those are the big ones that we pay attention to. What that identifies is, and maybe there's an actual number based on the type of facility, and by that I mean if the major has one lane, if it has 2 or more lanes, that puts it in a particular category. So in this particular case, what would be required, let me see if I'm saying it right. Okay. No. How do I want to say this? There are different versions of this analysis, and this will kind of explain. What I mean is, for it to be 100% needed, the number is 600 vehicles per hour on the major and 200 vehicles on the minor. That's if it meets it at 100%. The METCD allows us to reduce that number whenever we're in a populated area. We did reduce it. We reduced it by 70%. That new number becomes 420 on the major, and that's all traffic on the major, and 105 for the minor.
Is the major Coors?
Yes, the major is
And
Coors.
the minor is coming out of our subdivision.
Correct.
105 vehicles.
105 vehicles.
I would think in one peak hour.
In one peak hour, yes.
In 1 hour.
Well, no, for the 8 hours, it's any 8 hours of that day. Whatever 8 hours are the highest, those are the ones that we would put into the category. So,
Yeah, to understand, I think, here how these are working together, the major and minor.
Okay.
Bosque Meadows itself is fixed. It's not going to get any bigger as a subdivision, right? So the population and the number of vehicles is going to remain fairly steady.
Yes.
But the only difference, of course, was the addition of here the open space. You know, when that went in 2006, obviously the flow of traffic coming in and out increased, but it's been irregular. It's high sometimes, but you know, not all the time.
Right.
But the major keeps increasing, even though your data is not supporting it right now, just in terms of anecdotal, our own experience.
Right.
You know, we know that the traffic on Coors is increasing. Do both of them have to rise? In other words, those two figures, do they both have to rise to meet the warrant?
They both have to meet certain criteria. Major has a certain volume, minor has a certain volume. But all those 8 hours that are being compared have to meet it.
Yeah,
So Coors meets it, no problem. I mean, they exceeded, let's see, the number, for example, for the 70% reduction, the number for Coors is 420, it's 2,000. Done. You know, I mean, we understand that there's volume on Coors. That has never been the issue. Hold on one second. But the minor, so for the reduction, it's 105. What we counted between a 9-hour count between the hours of 6 and 6 p.m., exiting 34, 46, 39, 38, 34, 25, 25, 22, 29. These are just the numbers that we're comparing that to the 100. We're not even, I mean, I'm with you. If you were 20 cars off, I'd say count it again and bring your family. You know, get them in there. But we're a significant volume away from where we're at. And then there's another condition that asks for 4 hours. So it's okay, so we understand that everybody can meet the 8-hour criteria. Let's meet the 4-hour criteria. That one has numbers. It has 630 for the major, again, meet it, no problem. It has 53 for the minor. None of them meet that one either. So this is where we're at. I mean, we try our best to be as consistent as we can. We make every effort to treat everyone the same. These are the numbers that we're using to identify this need.
Are these in statute or are these internal policies of NMDOT or where?
These are federal guidelines, yes.
So just an observation, I do love data.
Yes.
But if I would think it's safe to say, please all speak for yourself, but I've had to change my patterns on Sunday because of Sagebrush. So I can't get out of my subdivision between certain periods of time. We're never going to reach that minor requirement because of the traffic that happens on Coors on a Sunday. So we either have, you literally have to put on your big kid pants on a Sunday if you want to try to get across the subdivision and get out, because if that traffic is coming out of the church, for you to even head north on Coors, It's a challenge.
Well,
Going
rush
south
hour
is
too,
even worse.
it's not just Sunday, it's rush hour as well.
Oh, yeah, very true. Or if there are any type of traffic accidents on any of the bridges, then Coors is a hot mess.
So it seems like we're kind of chasing our tail
Exactly.
because we're not ever going to have more residents in Bosque Meadows.
Right.
But the problem is still continuing, because Easter Sunday, we're all going to be trapped in our subdivision.
Let's consider that they actually have some stops on this.
Whether 5 or 10 vehicles exit out of Bosque Meadows, it doesn't matter because the volume on Coors is so bad that a lot of us, and I know myself, I won't get out there until I know that some of that traffic is possibly gone. So we wait, we're hostage. You know, but say maybe 50 exit like your criteria says. What about the volume on Coors, whether it's 1 vehicle or 10 or 50 that are exiting? We're still stuck.
We're kind of stuck with that data. I mean, we understand that you have to treat everyone the same and meet these guidelines, but it's kind of biased for us because we're not, as a community, we're really not going to grow. I mean, every house is pretty much full, so we're kind of stuck here. We're not really sure what to do then to help that data or to get beyond that minor so we can move forward with this, you know.
Well, certainly what I see is that we aren't meeting the criteria for what the federal guidelines have set forward. What do you think about some of the options that they proposed to you? There were a couple of options that seemed somewhat feasible, but you know, I have had to deal with this problem on a few occasions, but I don't have to drive in and out on a daily basis. And so I'd like to know what each of you, what you all think about some of the options.
I would say that of all the ones that I heard, the 4 different options, possible accommodations here, that the one that seemed the most appealing, was, despite the cons, was the acceleration lane south. Okay, more of that, even though it's not, you know, my ideal. But I'm considering such things as, even though we were talking about the possibility of alternate either south or north, I know there are problems. Obviously, Robertson Lane being private, and the idea of going behind the church, dealing with Sagebrush to get to La Maria and that kind of thing, would pose a problem. If we were trying to go north, going along the ditch, for example, to get access to Eagle Ranch, I know that property is open space property. I'm a volunteer here, I'm aware of that. Part of that is a protected archaeological site. So I think we would run into all kinds of problems trying to expand in either direction that way. The cons that were brought up in terms of the acceleration lane south, I experiencing all of them already. They would be no different than what I have to do now if I'm trying to go left, getting into that median area, sitting there, finding that space to get across the 3 lanes, to get into the median area, holding there, looking behind myself, waiting to see, what the pattern of flow is, trying to gauge, especially at night, is that car coming in the middle lane or in the the lane I'm trying to get into? All of that already exists. I mean, the only thing that the acceleration lane would give us more space to do it in, is so that there's not just one of us at a time trying to make that left turn, and there are other people trying to do it.
I'd like to back it up and just saying, and I'm sorry if I'm interrupting, but I feel the same way. As I'm getting older, it's really hard to tell how fast they're coming, and especially when they're coming over that hill. And so, having a larger space to sit there like a duck waiting to get shot. I mean, I just don't know if that's a scary place to be. And that's every day. It's not just on Sunday.
I don't think it's any different than what we do now. You still have to cross to get in the middle, and the majority of us, I think, wait in between the 2 medians to get through to the other lane. So the acceleration lane, I don't think is any different than what we do now.
Can I ask a question for the people that are sitting, as you're sitting in the meeting, are you already turned southbound, or are you parallel in the meeting?
No, you have to go straight, just like if you were going into a lane. So you have to be this, otherwise you'd be sticking out
Exactly.
into the
It's
traffic.
so narrow. I hate to complicate things, but I want to add something something to this really quick. Councilor Sanchez, as most of you guys know, he didn't represent this district since he's been in office. We've taken it over in the last few years. But since I've worked for him, which is going on 10 now, he's been concerned about this intersection and how the residents are getting in and out of this intersection. Something that I want to throw in there, Nancy, I hate to complicate it, but I'm sitting here thinking about when I was driving in for the meeting. We're talking about the folks that need to leave and go southbound. But what I did notice, the people that would be coming in, no one was sitting there while I was doing it, but going southbound, trying to turn eastbound into your subdivision, this doesn't cure it. Nancy, I know these numbers are 2 years old. One, can they be rerun? And two, are there any other considerations? I have no idea at this point what the accident numbers are here, but are there any other things that can be considered? Because if you're saying that the major meets it, okay, and probably exceeds it, and will continue to exceed it because we're growing so much on the west side. I've lived here my entire life. And they are never going to change. I mean, whether, this half of the room moves and this doesn't, there's going to be new people that move in, but it's not going to increase their numbers. So they will, like they say, never meet it. But then, with the increase in traffic or where it's at now, they're never going to be able to get out or in safely. And I say that just sitting in there, and I've been through here plenty with people that I know that live here and in the open space. Is that something that you guys can look at with other criteria? We're talking about realigning roads and adding new roads, and I'm going to hang me for doing it, but this is our Director of Municipal Development, and I talk with her very, very often about problems, not just here, but throughout the district and city, that we get a lot of similar questions. And I will tell you, just by working with them, for Councilor Sanchez, it is not a cheap undertaking, nor is it light, but is this something that we can consider having the numbers re-looked at? Because these options are great to get out, but what about the southbound traffic coming home? So I hate to complicate things with that, but just coming in, I'm thinking, if I was coming the other direction, I don't think I'd make the meeting. I'd be much later than I already am. So
But I guess that we need to clarify when it is occurring. We're in an urban area. Everybody at 8 o'clock is getting on the road, or 7:30. What's our peak? 6:45 to 8:15 or something. It is the nature of the beast. We have this same scenario in multiple locations across the city in the urban areas. Same occurs at school hours, schools during drop-off and pickup. Sometimes signals aren't what they're cracked up to be. If you ask the people at, what's the intersection just north of Coors, Sequoia? No. Those people have a signal and they can't get out. It is so saturated. I mean, what's the Murphy's Law or Einstein's theory? Only one vehicle, a matter can only be in one place at one time. I mean, you can't have two cars in the same spot. Saturated is saturated. It's not the great answer, but I mean that's where we're at. So you're not alone. These issues come up in areas all over the city in these high volume facilities. But a signal is not necessarily the correct, the fix all either, because a lot of times the progression of the roadways is.
But it will make things safer.
Right.
Well,
And the safety of the neighborhood, right, is really what's at risk.
the safety of all the
The minute
traffic.
we lose a life going through there,
The safety of all the traffic. Signals bring its own issues. A lot of right turn, a lot of hard angle crashes, a lot of rear end crashes. I mean, it's not the save all. There are countermeasures. There are pros and cons to every traffic device that we put out there. Safety of the public is essential. We agree with that. We're not wanting to put anybody in harm's way. But at this point, we have our information based on the number of conflict points at an intersection. Anytime a roadway intersects, there are multiple conflict points. So this is where we try to reduce the number of conflict points. Yes?
The safest options that I see of the four that were presented to us are using the adjacent properties. Are those viable options? Can that happen?
The issue that the woman here raised about there being potential archaeological sites, I don't know. That would have to be something we would have to explore. I do like that idea, but again, I don't know if that's something that one would need to confirm that it is a viable option. I'm assuming that that has not been verified on your end.
We just were putting every idea that we have.
That's something that we could probably get a very quick answer for, but I mean, is that something, if in fact, let's just make the assumption that there are not archaeological sites there, and it would not prohibit any sort of potential protection, what would that be something that would be a viable option for you?
I think so. I've been thinking that for years.
North or south? Is there a preference between the north side or the
Probably
south?
north, just get away from sagebrush completely.
Did you have a
Well,
comment?
just another observation, I would not be opposed to having, some of the shared property being able to exit, because when we had the Bosque fires, not that this would have solved the problem at that time, given where the fires were, but we have one entrance into our subdivision. Being able to have a second one could literally mean life or death, because we are so close to the Bosque. And so it would be nice to, I don't really have a preference of which direction, but it would be nice to have another exit out of the subdivision.
And that's a very good point. The subdivision that I live in, it's one way in, one way out, and we live along the Bosque as well, and it's very scary to think that, if there was that type of tragedy, what will happen to the residents that are stuck there. So that's a good point. Yes, sir.
My question is, let's say we go to Robinson Road, I don't know if it's private road or not. There's no lighting, you're just gonna have to move one spot to another spot. If you go the other way, the same thing, unless you have a light. If without a light, you're gonna have the same situation, same scenario.
So it's my understanding that the two options on the north side would go over to Eagle Ranch Road, which does have a light, right?
Yeah,
or to
it
the
does.
south, which would be La Orilla. So there would be a road made to access from the subdivision to potentially one of those two lights.
That would be the thought. I have to believe when this site first came on board, with that portion to the north of Bosque Meadows being identified as commercial, there was the access. There was a direct access to the signal, and that's probably why it got through where it got through. So that it changed over time is what kind of throws the wrench in this.
So option 3A or 3B, if let's just say to assume that we could potentially do one of those options, the existing in and out right off of this road would remain the same, so this would just provide a second option for those residents that wanted to ensure access to a safety signal.
We can't guarantee that. Like I said, it's getting more and more difficult making a left out onto Coors. We're talking 6 lanes, 43,000 cars. It's difficult. So what is everywhere else on Coors is a right in, right out.
So you're not going to block the street off of Coors if we make this new road?
This would be in addition.
It would be in addition, but we can't guarantee all the movements currently going on. Yes.
It would, at a minimum, be a right in, right out.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any way to have a light, I understand, no light at our area, but a light with a pressure switch, only to allow us to go out?
But you'd have to stop
It's
the
a
traffic.
sensor, it's a sensor, it's just to allow us to go out. In other words, it would only come on, I know that these lights exist, I don't know the exact
It's just like a few
terminology.
minutes. It gives us a few minutes.
Like the light doesn't change if there's no car waiting, it only changes when we're waiting to actually leave. That way the flow of traffic isn't constantly disrupted.
I think Sevilla's like that, because it seems like the only time we have to stop at Sevilla is when there's a car coming down one.
It cycles both legs, whether it sits
that would be a
more
consideration.
longer in the major and then not as much in the minor, maybe
Right.
perceived that way, but it does cycle all that. It doesn't just rest in
does.
green on one until somebody comes. It'll constantly cycle, which would be, I'm sure you've been in a signal at 11 p.m. There's no one coming on the road, and you sit there and wait. Yes, but then you get your green, and then you go, and so it's that. It's that whole concept. We don't. It would it would not do, we would be doing you a disservice if we introduce something like that, one, driver expectancy. They wouldn't be expecting it, like in the morning I drove through, and there was no issues, and then next time it has a signal. So it would be one of those, it would have to be a full signal or nothing. There's not like a partial signal, because it's not what people are used to on a roadway like that.
The potential for crashes would go up.
Yeah.
Because if I don't expect to stop there, except when you all push the button, I don't know, I'm gonna go shooting through there, so that fatality you're talking about, would most probably, the chances of that would increase dramatically.
If that was automated, though, would it? If it was on automated, like?
It would still be driver expectancy, because I drive through there 1 hour going back and forth making deliveries. And within that hour, at the 45-minute mark, the light comes on. And then I'm like doing 51 miles an hour.
This is why when we do put new signals out, we just don't turn them on. They flash yellow for a while, and what, 48 hours?
To get
And then what it is it's training the drivers that are driving through there that, hey, there's a signal here. And that's why there is that warning period, and then the signal gets turned on.
Well, I don't go through a light and think, okay, well, I didn't stop at it that time, I'm not gonna, you see the light, you think, okay, it may turn red, So
the way it was understood, I understood it, sounds the way that Gilbert understood it, was that this light's going to be dark any other time other than when
I don't think they mean dark, they just mean that it wouldn't turn green for us unless.
So in those peak
there.
hours.
Yeah,
Right.
I think there's
Kind of like in California.
similar on Montano, before you hit the bridge, there's a large subdivision over there, and I can't think of the name of the street, but that light pretty much
It's
for the most
listed
part,
on
yeah, it pretty much stays green until there's traffic coming out of that subdivision. But Officer, I'm sorry, you had your hand up, would you like to ask?
Well, I was curious because I know that earlier you said that they were federal guidelines. So are there any exemptions to those guidelines? I mean, I didn't hear the word requirement, so I'm wondering, is there any way to get around that? That was my first part. The second part was also, at what point do you make it a requirement that now we don't cross traffic across Coors? Because from my sideline view, passing that traffic, I know you're talking about deaths and accidents, there are people that are willing to take that chance, and that's how that happens.
Especially when
And so at what point does the traffic become too much for a side street like this to say, I'm going to take that chance?
And our numbers are going to change coming out of Bosque Meadows. It's not like, we're stuck with these houses and the amount of people that live here. We're going to have high volume on Coors, but we're going to remain the same.
Right.
But I think what you're assuming that the light is the only option. I think we presented the other options.
I think that probably, so that we can have egress out of here, the viable solution would be to maybe go down to La Orilla, or go down to, but how is the city and the state going to work with this, and how long is it going to take?
It's a very good question. But I have another question. Also, because Sagebrush has the police directing traffic, why can't we have the police also stopping to allow us, a few cars at a time to go out?
We just had that conversation this morning.
This was actually one of our let's throw it out there
Yeah.
type fishing expeditions, and I mean, the church pays to have an officer out there to help with their.
Well, you were your first, so like.
They pay for officer, they have a turning lane too, they paid for that, and they got it like that.
Well, they had to go through the process of identifying how the traffic was going to flow.
I mean, and that's something that, with all these options, even this one right now, you want a uniformed officer out there to help direct traffic? No. And any of these other options that it all costs money, and so that is also.
We're also taxpayers, and we shouldn't have to pay officers any additional money to be able to get in and out of our subdivision. So
But that's not for me, I'm not in charge of APD.
Well, I think she's saying that it goes also into the streets. It's not that you should have to pay for somebody to, direct traffic to let you out, that the streets should afford that opportunity
And
for
so
you to get into and out of your neighborhoods.
And in other developments, so whenever, you know, the Walmarts are being built, whenever other developments, schools and everything, when they come online, the developments pay for the off-site conditions to be improved for what the access requirements are.
I think what we want on Sundays, Saturday afternoons and Sundays is for the policemen to realize that, you know, there is a neighborhood down here and we need to get out.
It's impactful
So
what they're doing.
what they do is they let the church traffic, and then once they got some of the church traffic out, then they let the light go. Well,
And then we're,
so
we never have
so
a break.
we don't have a break in traffic.
And here's something that I'm willing to do.
It took me 20 minutes to get out.
Obviously, you all are taxpaying citizens, we shouldn't have to pull together cash to pay an officer to let you in and out of your subdivision. I can't promise that we'll be able to do this, but I will make an attempt to talk to the folks over at APD or Birmingham County to see if there's something that we can do. I'd also be happy to talk to the folks over at Sagebrush, because obviously their traffic is what's creating this physical and public safety issue for the residents of this community. But that might be a temporary solution until we figure out what we have with the long-term solution, because that's only a temporary fix for Sundays. The issues going in and out. I mean, my 85-year-old grandmother who has difficulty driving at times, you know, I wouldn't feel comfortable with her, you know, trying to get out of the subdivision. I mean, I'm even scared to get out of the subdivision when cars are going as fast as they are. I understand that people are not going the speed limit like they should be up and down this road. But, you know, to follow up with the officers' questions, you know, I think it's worth exploring. I mean, I'm not talking about waiting another 2 years. I'm really disgusted that it's taken this long, and I'm not sure who was leading the charge on this before, but it shouldn't have taken 2 years. And so I think that we need to explore that option. I think that we need to ensure that there is no other way besides, you know, the guidelines that you set forth. If there's a way around it, I think that that should be the first option, assuming from what I'm hearing from a lot of folks here, that would be the best option for everyone. But we also probably understand that there might be some restrictions and we might not be able to do that. And so we want to have a plan B, but I hoped that we would have gotten the specifics as to why the light was not an option aside from just the general guidelines.
That's our criteria, and that was the reason why nothing was done, because it didn't warrant a signal.
So again, I'm sorry, just to follow up on the officer's question,
Yes.
guidelines or requirement, is there an exemption in there?
What it says in here, I got in NETCD right now. In fact, if you want, just for transparency, I can bring it up on here.
It is a federal guideline. It has shall, may, and should conditions.
Yes, that makes sense.
Shall are the highest constraints, there you go. Could we do whatever we want? Probably not. But if we try to follow the guideline as best we can, then we provide a consistent, I mean, just the way the question is crafted makes me a little nervous. Get around it. You know, I mean, I'm like, okay, so now we're trying to make special conditions. So what keeps the neighborhood down the street that has maybe just less than you to get their signal? Because we're going to get around it. You know, I mean, we have to be careful what we're asking for, and what you're asking us to do, because we have criteria that we need to meet.
I don't think what we're suggesting is opening the floodgates, and we certainly don't want to. We don't want to, you know, encourage everyone to not comply with rules and guidelines. But at the end of the day, as the woman indicated, we're talking about a safety issue, and so we need to ensure that the needs of this particular community, whether there's, you know, 5 people that live here or, you know, 200 people, these people are risking their lives each and every day, and the fact that a solution has not been brought forth in the last 2 years is really troubling. And so, you know, I want to continue to potentially go down that route. Perhaps they'll tell us that we can't go there, and we just need to ensure that we cross every T, dot every I, and explore every option. But I don't feel that from what you have presented, and I know that you're not the direct person, you're just the messenger, and I know you work on this, but I don't feel that it has been fully exhausted, and I was expecting to get that fully exhausted report today, and unfortunately that's not what I'm hearing.
We have it available from 2014, and it sounds like there's a new count that's requested. Like we said, not much has changed within Bosque Meadows or,
Well, the problem with
the
my
area.
request on that actually is we know it's not gonna change for this community. The only thing that's gonna change is the major traffic. They're locked, they're locked in those numbers, again, because they will never move. Two things, is there a way you can send that presentation to our office so I can share it with everyone here, representative as well as yourself? And then two, I'm talking with our director here as well. I will have to find out about the land to the north, if there is any archaeological issues that we need to look at. We can also try to figure out if there's anything that could go to the south and have an adjacent exit that way. Please keep in mind, and it's something that we were talking about, if you choose going to the south, that also gives the church folks an exit, so they're going to come through your community.
Exactly.
So that does open that up. But on our end with the city, we will look into that. I know Councilor Sanchez would expect that. Again, I understand criteria representative. I know Councilor Sanchez would be right there with you. It's never going to change for them. So we could run it every 2 years and it will never change on this. You let us know when you're going to do the test. Everyone have a huge barbecue at your house and ask everyone to come over. I mean, other than that.
It could change. Open space could increase its number of events down here. It could add another building, just like Sagebrush did up here when they added their sanctuary up there 2 years ago. And I want this on the record, that Antonio Aramillo, who was the District 3 traffic engineer, and he was here at that meeting, he specifically said that Sagebrush never did a proper traffic analysis for that building, for that complex, and that for that expansion. And it's required by the city to have added on down there. They never did it. And then what their jury rig thing was adding that acceleration lane or turning lane, and then their dribble lane that comes out of that Romerson lane, so that they can dribble on down here, you know. That's how they compensated, but they never did a proper traffic study for their own business.
A response to that would be, if the original traffic impact analysis identified that future development would come on board, and the off-site improvements were identified and built, then it would have covered it, even though a revised one wasn't completed once the building actually went up. So I'm not sure. Antonio still works for the state. I will call him to confirm.
He pointed that out at the time, 2 years ago. My only other point is that not only are we dealing with those 3 lanes of traffic, we also have to deal with that damn U-turn out there, watching somebody who we think is going to turn into the subdivision, and they do a U-turn, and I lay in the horn, you know, but, you know, they're, fuck you, you know, out of here. So, yeah, that's a problem, despite the sign, that we got to deal with that too. So that sign probably isn't going to go away either.
When I recorded the traffic the other day during when the church was letting out, there were 8, actually I said in the video that there were 8. There were actually 10 U-turns and 1 out. I'm sorry, an hour and a half, 10 U-turns. And in addition to the church traffic.
And I've noticed the officers sit there, you know, I mean, they'll sit right off of the subdivision. There have been accounts where maybe a few of those people got stopped, you know, for that.
And this gentleman's been.
But not very often.
I can answer the question about the land to the north. It is protected. It's one of the largest archaeological pueblos in the middle of Rio Grande in the state. So, and it is actually part of Petrichor National Monument.
Right.
So
that's off the table.
yeah.
So
And the reason open space bought what we call Bosque Meadows is to protect that whole area.
I think if we were trying to go north, we'd have to go on the other side of the ditch.
Okay.
You know, that would get into, commercial property up there at the shopping area.
Bob's Burgers and all that.
Bob's Burgers and all of that.
So the south
The
option is still
south,
a
if we could walk out here right now into the parking lot, and there's a gate at the end of open space, and if we open that gate, we could drive right out Robertson Lane. The problem would be, Robertson Lane again is you know, still private, I believe. But the problem is if we have that access, we would still have to get across the Sagebrush property to be able to get to La Orilla. So that we would have to negotiate with, somehow somebody
The
would have to negotiate with
configuration
the
there
church.
is Roberson Lane from 45 to more or less the channel back here is owned by Sagebrush. Then there are 5 other private, maybe 4. I'm not certain of that, but there are 4 landowners that have access to Roberson Lane right there, and they come out. So my guess is those 4 owners were there before the church was, so somehow they made an agreement with them. So they are liable to interact with everyone, or with the community, but that's a matter between here and the church.
And remember, they're going back to La Orilla. Just think about this. They're building a theater up there. They're building a nice mall on the other side of the
big new shopping center that's turning into La Orilla.
southwest corner. They're building a huge complex there with shops, theater, and everything. Between that, between the church, La Orilla will be a mess. How are we going to get out? That's another thing too. I mean, I see it. I'm getting really jaded because I don't see it out of here.
Well, based on what I just heard, it seems like going north is totally out of the question now. So for me personally, the only option left is the traffic signal. And going back to the topic of exceptions, if you travel north on Coors, frontage road is only about 100 yards distance from Paseo. So the half-mile rule apparently doesn't apply to the frontage road signal. So some exception had to have been made for that light at frontage road. Now, I've been told since 1998 that was a temporary light. That was the exception I was told, and I have letters saying that. So, but my point is, there's obviously exceptions to be had, and we meet the half-mile rule. And I don't really like a bunch of lights on Coors Road, but I really don't see any other viable option than what I've seen. I appreciate the effort, but I don't see an option.
So we had the fire back here, what was it, in what year? It's been about
06.
I think officers were stationed over here at Paradise. I mean, Eagle Ranch, and they were stationed right here in Orlando. We couldn't get out of here. We were locked in here and the fire was raging.
Why would we think that they would do that?
Because they just wouldn't let us out, because if we didn't leave in time, say a lot of people didn't want to leave their homes, and they stayed in here, there was no way to get out. And they had rural main areas blocked off.
So could we go back to the options real quick? I just have a question on that acceleration lane. One of the things that really comes to mind when I see this is we also have that merge lane for Sagebrush, and my concern is if we add this acceleration lane, we're just going to have a very long merging lane for Sagebrush.
It'll definitely be an area of weaving. You'll have people that are trying to speed up to go southbound, coming from this location. You'll have people slowing down to make the left turn. That's correct. And those are the part of the balance. I mean, what's shown there is by no means the appropriate length. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gilbert. It was just to show the concept of how that would be. But you're right. It would definitely get very close to that left turn lane. And so those are the items. We haven't vetted this. We haven't done a full design. Please understand that we're just trying to put ideas out there. That is why the option 2, the super street, seems to cover the basis in the sense that at least it puts you, it gets you in the other direction, it takes you completely out. You're just having to look at the northbound lanes, and then you have to worry about the southbound lanes. And then that's where that U-turn option comes in. Yes.
I have to leave, so, because my concern is that those options are not going to work. A light will work. Federal government's also doing exemptions. We need to look into that. Can they do an exemption? I mean, everybody does exemptions. So that's what I want. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments.
At the last meeting that we had 2 years ago, another thing was that we've been here since 1998, And one of the reasons, we bought the house here was because we were told by the home developer that there would be a light. And last meeting, we were told that the money had been set aside by the developer. I don't know if all of it was, but there was a good portion for the light. I think somebody from the city told us that last meeting, a couple of years ago.
Is this D.R. Horton?
Yes.
I thought it was somebody, from what we were trying to recall, we were thinking it was somebody from the developer. But we'd love to see that agreement. We'd love to see that that was something.
Were those assessments already paid for in those contracts? When the developer, because I mean, if the assessments have already been paid for.
That's a good question. We have no idea. These were occurring without our knowledge, also between the property owner and the developer.
Where would we find that information?
I would think you could seek legislative help to maybe go after D.R. Horton, because they're pretty big. To see if you can force it out of.
Keep it in mind, if it was identified, they still don't have, it would still be either the city or the state. I'm trying to remember if that was a person that was under the city's jurisdiction at the time. Would still have to be vetted by the agency there. It's not a developer, the one that gets to decide, because they still have to present it to the agency about adjacent roadways, and it has to be going through the process of a signal warrant analysis. So they might have identified it in the original TIA, assuming there was that commercial development to the north. That would be the only reason, but yeah, we can't speak to money that was set aside. That is not.
But this really hasn't been filed, there wasn't.
It was just told to us, so I wouldn't. I would have no idea.
When there are new developments going on, there are probably similar types of engagements or contracts or negotiations. Where what is the process?
Their contractors actually build it at that point in time. So Walmart comes on board, they want access. They pay for those improvements at that time.
So there is not an escrow set aside. Yeah, we don't have that mechanism in place. So it's built on the front end, waiting for the.
So there's probably, it'd be very difficult, if at all possible, to properly locate that information.
Right.
Do we have a couple more comments?
One other question, suggestion, I don't know, I know that there was a mention earlier about a frontage road, and I know that that land you're saying is preserved, but is there enough room on the shoulder to add like a frontage road to get to the light where you guys can, access north or south, going towards like Eagle Ranch Road?
James, can you identify the full area?
Well, the shoulder would be.
I think in front of the arc.
Right, I'm thinking off the shoulder.
Right along the distance for the encroachment
to make it like, 2 lanes along
Well, I know there's
the side of Coors.
There's a bus stop.
It's up, like where that green dot is, they're like following the sort of Arroyo-ish
So there's
section there, yes.
You have the public art.
The only part would be once you get to the commercial development, you might have to join the road that goes through the middle of there.
Right, which we have.
But,
like
or there on the side.
Right there.
Yeah.
protected land go all the way up to
But would there be enough room there to get here? What is
Yeah,
that?
like coming
Up
along
towards
here.
northwest? Yeah. Yeah.
It would be something that.
Just another fee.
That's exactly what we're looking for. But it would be, the state has requirements on how roadways are designed. We can't have parallel, because it'd be a two-way facility, just adjacent to a roadway, so it would have to be identified how that would work. But I mean, as opposed to it running on the eastern side of that property, we're running on the western side of the property. But it sounds like it's all open space. But it wouldn't be something that would be available adjacent to the roadway, because the state federal guidelines, we have to obtain as much or leave a clear zone distance, so that if cars do errantly leave the roadway, they have a place to run out to. We can't have hazards right up against the edge of the roadway. So there are those conditions that we would have. But if something on the property...
Well, I'm saying, I don't know how much land you have to play with on the shoulder of
Coors.
Yes,
in talking about these roads out here, does this mean that the entrance from Coors would be blocked off so that we can't get in or out?
from this current exit, it would not be blocked.
Right.
Okay.
The left out maybe is a difficult one now, and that could be one that would be restricted in the future, which is what currently happens everywhere else on Coors, like I said. If you look up and down Coors, people have a left in, but no one else has a left out unless it's at a signal.
Well, I was just wondering what happens to school buses, all the big trucks, UPS, FedEx, what happens to all of these, sundown? So how is that going to affect all of this getting in and getting out, when, like rush hour, for example, in the morning?
Those would be all part of the design vehicles once that concept has been accepted. All that would be taken into account if that design is something that's out there.
Because down in Robertson,
So, yeah, there's an example just to the south where it's a left in only, not a left out. And
That's the church.
that's the church, right? So that's the concept, is that it would allow the left in, and then for going southbound and then northbound, it'd be a right in, right out.
So I had the opportunity to listen to a lot of the comments. It seems like most people are on the same page. What I would like to do before we leave here, I want to ensure that we continue to move the process forward. We don't want to see another 2 years pass and then we're all back here again. So I was hoping to get some type of commitment from the NMDOT to, one, to help us as we move forward. My office will continue to want to work on this issue and look at possible exemptions that we might be able to pursue. Obviously, you, as an employee of the New Mexico Department of Transportation, can't necessarily advocate for that, but I would like to work with you all in trying to find out whether or not that's an option. And, I will, speak to whatever appropriate officials or entities that I need to speak to advocate for the light. I think that it's not entirely off the table. I know that it's definitely an uphill battle, but I think that all options have not been exhausted at this point, and until that happens, I don't want to take it off the table.
Okay.
The other component is I want to, probably have to work with the city on this and whoever has records to ensure that there is in fact that the north option and the south option are not really viable. Sounds like they might not be, but I think until we get a little bit more, do a little bit more research on those options as to whether or not they are options. And so the last thing that I and my office will personally commit to is at least trying to find a temporary solution. I'm going to talk to APD, Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department, and if need be, Sagebrush. I can't imagine that they would be okay with creating this problem and not helping us try to find a solution. Obviously not with the light, but perhaps being able to find resources to have an officer out on Sundays.
They were here at the last meeting.
What's that?
They had a representative
They did.
here at the
Okay.
last meeting.
Okay.
And this is how we've ended up after 2 years with their representative.
Well, this is what I can commit to you. Like I said, I found out about it a couple months ago, or a month ago actually, and I'm committed to seeing this through for you. I have some cards that my assistant has. Please take one. Barbara has been a really great contact, and it seems like she's getting information to you all, and we'll figure out the best way to communicate with the neighborhood. Does anyone have any specific questions directly for me, or have any concerns with the plan that I've sort of laid out?
I just want to say thank you, Representative, and also Representative House Majority Leader Gentry. So we're getting this together. We've been working with the community and Barbara for quite some time, and being that it is a state road, we really appreciate you guys being willing to be here and help out with this. So thank you.
And thank you for being here. I look forward to working with the councilor on this. And one more thing, can we get a general timeline as to what we might be able to expect in terms of trying to find some answers to these questions?
I guess I'm still not clear on what it is, like, to run another analysis. Is that what you're asking?
I don't think that we're, we don't want to spend another 2 years doing another study. I think that it's very clear that this area is not growing. But the traffic out there is, and it continues to become a greater safety issue for these residents. And so people are, putting themselves at risk. What I want to find out is whether or not there is any exemption that the NMDOT has been able to utilize in other areas for similar circumstances. I will advocate the heck out of this issue, and like I said, talk to whoever I need to talk to, but I need to understand what you all have been able to do in the past in other instances. That I don't know, I'm not an expert on traffic safety lights or the guidelines that you have presented, and so I'd like to work with your office on trying to figure out if that's a viable option and exhaust all of those remedies before we take it off the table, because in my opinion, I don't think it should be taken off the table at this point. And then,
we'll take it back.
and then the second component, though, is if that is not an option, I think that we need to still look at whether or not options in the B1 or 3A and 3B, the use of the adjacent property, even understanding that, I mean, certainly we wouldn't be able to go onto an archaeological site, but perhaps there's a small area or something that we might be able to utilize to the north or to the south as to whether or not those are actually viable.
Or that frontage road that she suggested.
Yes.
That's not one of those.
Yeah, but
That's
it's kind of tight, and I like that idea. So exploring those options, because it sounds to me that the acceleration lane is not something that would make everyone happy here. It's like the same issue.
Still got to cross.
So knowing that, is there a particular time period that might be feasible so we can, perhaps we can get together or have a small group of people, Barbara, perhaps some other interested folks that we can kind of sit down and then, at a later time invite the entire community, because certainly want to go through all of those options before we bring everyone back to the table.
It makes sense. What we would need to do is go back to our executive staff and talk with them. I have vetted this report with them. They are, at this point, are seeing where it's not supportive of a signal. So we will bring it back based on the comments that were made here. Thank you, everybody, for please speaking your mind. And we'll talk with them again based on the information that we're getting, that we got from here and the study.
Well, and I appreciate that. I appreciate you all being here to providing this type of information and taking the time to look at possible options. And so, thank you. So again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to take one of my cards. Brian, my assistant, will be handing those out if dealing with this issue or other community issues on your state rep.
So there isn't a timeline, it's just, we'll just wait.
I will follow up. I'll follow up with you next week to within the next 2 weeks to at least get a definitive time period in which this investigatory period will take place, and then I will be in close contact and continue to provide updates. If you all are getting antsy and want information, don't hesitate to call, share with you whatever information I might have at that point. And yes,
and I just want to quickly reiterate, when you take the information back, because you're listening to all these comments, and I know it's been said before, but I really want to reiterate, since '98, our subdivision hasn't grown. Coors was 2 lanes. So since '98, Coors is now 3 lanes on each side. Sagebrush wasn't there, it now is. Panda Express wasn't there, now it is. Village Inn wasn't there, now it is. You have all these other developments that are happening. So since '98 now, and it's just going to continue to grow. So I think that's really relevant to take back to wherever you need to take that back to, because that's just evidence that there's an increasing amount of traffic north and southbound Coors, but with our development not growing. So that's really the biggest issue. And that's why the data that you have, it needs to be dissected and say, well, even though the subdivision hasn't grown, the traffic has, based on this information since '98. So I just really wanted to reiterate that.
I'd also like to know, since the Coors corridor expansion renovation has been put on hold or dispensed with, what elements in there, we're going to address traffic flow and whatnot. If looking at some of that, because that could be a future piece, on top of this.
That's a great question and a great segue. We currently have an analysis on the Coors corridor between Eduardo and PDM for this exact issue, for the traffic as it approaches I-40 and how it's moving through the corridor. So that is something, that's data that's being collected now. We will definitely bring that back and provide that information to everybody so that everyone else can see how the corridor itself is functioning with the existing infrastructure that's in place.
I'm just curious if there's any way to add the information about, during those peak times on Sundays, Saturdays, that how long it does take for a vehicle to actually have enough space to merge into the Coors northbound traffic, because I think it's not only an issue about getting across safely and going southbound, but even if you had a lane that allowed you to accelerate northbound, how are you going to be able to get into traffic when it is bumper to bumper to bumper? Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I think that they have a unique situation in the fact that yes, their community is smaller at Wolfgrove, but they also have probably one of the biggest let-outs of population at one time, and the fact that they are, butting up against two areas of land that they can't move either way, and the other side is the church. I think that all of those, nothing's changing here except for the number of traffic cars that are going northbound to the point where you can't even get safely on northbound during certain hours of time, and that's what feeds into the traffic signals, that you can't get north and you can't get south. South is like secondary,
And you can't get into the community from the north.
Okay.
It's taking you 15 minutes to get
No press for time, but could we like compare emergency response times and their ability to get in here?
I don't think that's an issue.
I was going to say, emergencies, now there, once they hit the lights, everybody better react to that.
We will.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for being here. Don't forget to take